On Thursday, some new hotfixes were pushed, changing and nerfing some things for Havoc and Vengeance Demon Hunter. In today's video, we're going to go over them. Before we begin though, I do want to say that a lot of my viewers aren't subscribed. So if you're watching this and you're not subscribed, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really help me out. I have tons of great content through Dragonflight and beyond. Now enjoy the video. So we have a new round of Demon Hunter changes. We're going to go over them right now. They came out a few days ago. It took me some time to get to this here, so I apologize for that. But anyways, we're going to get into them. There are some Havoc changes. There are some Vengeance Demon changes. Now, a lot of them are going to look like a little bit buffs, but realistically, it is a nerf for both specs. However, it's not that big. Havoc's is pretty minimal. We can talk about that when we get there. Vengeance is a little bigger and opens up a little bit more discussion than that, but we'll talk about that when we get down there. So we're going to scroll down. Demon Hunter obviously is first. We're going to talk with Havoc because it's on top. For Demonic Wards, your tattoos reduce magic damage taken by 10% now. So 10% is how it's always been on live. It was up to 15%, kind of just baseline in Dragonflight, and it made us really unkillable. With the Magic DR trait, we had like 21% or higher passive magic damage reduction, which is a lot of passive magic damage reduction on top of our leech, on top of blur. Magic damage basically just didn't kill demon hunters ever. You're going to take more magic damage, obviously 5% more, but realistically, not that big of a deal. It's just going to rein in our tankiness against magic a little bit. There are some issues for Havoc with physical, living physical hits. All we have basically is blur. The talent in the infernal armor doesn't actually do much for us because our armor is so low to begin with. Really, it just scales off of how much armor you have, right? And we just don't have base armor. So maybe something could be looked at, changing that to just a physical DR to give us an option there. But realistically, that's not the biggest issue. A lot of things don't really deal physical damage in most cases. But if there's ever a physical boss, then we could be pretty hurt by that. Next change, they reduced Accelerating Blade down to 20% increased damage for each enemy hit instead of 25. Basically what this meant is that like your last glaive, whenever you throw out a glaive, it always hit 3 targets. Your last one would deal 75% more damage. It's now going to deal less than that. It's going to deal 60% more damage, 15% nerf from that last glaive. It's going to rein in our bloodlet damage a little bit. Bloodlet was not, our highest damage in Dragonflight. We had other stuff like Immolation or I-Beam, stuff like that. But Bloodlet did a good bit of damage. This is going to rein it in. I'm going to deal, less than I did before. Really, though, 5% nerf to this isn't that big of a change. You're going to do to the first target pretty much unchanged damage. It's just going to be like the last target in the chain that really feels the effect of this one. There's one more change to Havoc, which we'll talk on at the end because it involves vengeance stuff. But that's really the changes for Havoc. We did get an offsetting buff for the Accelerating Blade thing. We got a buff to another talent, which I'll talk about again after. So that's it for Havoc. Havoc, pretty much unchanged. We're still really, really good in what we're good at. We're still probably going to be one of the better specs in M+. Nothing's really changing with that. It's not really changing talents. We're not changing any of that with this. So, hey, just a little bit of tuning down, a little bit less survivable, a little bit less damage. Now for Vengeance. Now, Vengeance actually has a ton of changes. So if we go in and we look at what they've done here, you can see a bunch of buffs here, actually. Now, the reason they're doing these buffs is because they actually ended up nerfing Vulnerability, which is the damage buff on Frailty. So what we have here is we have Fiery Brand deals 5% to 30% of attack power fire damage every 2 seconds. So this is the dot portion of Fiery Brand that is kind of baked into the class. Shear's been buffed. Sigil of Flames dot's been buffed. Soul Cleave has been buffed. Feldev has been buffed. That's really important. Fiery Brand, again, does more instant damage, does more dot damage. Fracture got buffed. Frailty now lasts 6 seconds. Sigil of Flame deals more damage. Soul Carver deals more damage. Spirit Bomb deals more damage. And Void Reaver also deals more damage. Frailty now also reduces all damage you take from affected targets by 4%. Sorry, no, I don't know why I said that. It lasts 6 seconds now instead of 5, which is the same as up here. All of that is to offset the change to vulnerability, which now goes from 4% per point to 2% per point. So what that means is that when you put 1 point into the Frailty talent, it's going to be a 2% damage done per stack of Frailty. So at max, it'll be 4% instead of 8%, which means a 50% reduction in the kind of applications of that talent. So why are they doing this change? So what does this change amount to? So effectively what they've done is they've done a 5% buff to Soul Cleave and Spirit Bomb, a 10% buff to Sigil of Flame, Fracture, Shield, Soul Carver, and Feldev, and then a 100% buff, 50% on the initial hit, and 600% to the dot to Fiery Brand, which is kind of crazy. 600% buff is a large buff. And in exchange for that, they've nerfed Frailty by 50%. So that works out to roughly a 5 to 6% damage nerf in single target and AoE, all inclusive, of course, when played properly. And then in our burst phases, it is a 10 to 20% nerf because of the kind of stacks of vulnerability you're able to get. However, what this does is it actually does reduce the skill cap of Vengeance a little bit. So it brings people who obviously weren't as good at managing the frailty stats, weren't as good at getting that big burst out. It does bring them up, right? Now you're going to feel the loss of the frailties a little bit less if you weren't as good or as used to playing with them. And in exchange, your abilities are going to do more. I think it's probably a little bit too heavy-handed of a nerf. I don't think Vengeance is single target anything crazy compared to some other specs, especially because a lot of things got buffed. Bear got crazy buffed. Bloody K still doing really good damage. We'll see if Brew ever gets changed because they have a lot of weird feedback loops. But I don't know if Vengeance necessarily needed this. On top of that, you're going to end up leeching less damage as well. So there's a little bit of a hit to survivability. Realistically, though, Vengeance's survivability is not changing. It's still going to be the same as it was before. However, you're going to leech less because you're doing less damage to your target's vulnerability. So really what this does is makes this... It does reduce the skill cap for lots of players who play Vengeance, which I think is a net negative. And I don't think we really needed these nerfs. You know, maybe a little bit nerf to our burst, sure, but then give us a little bit more of a compensating buff, so that's not too big of a change. 10 to 20% burst window loss is kind of a big deal. Like, maybe make vulnerability 3% instead, but, you know, I'm not the devs and everything like that. But I do think it's good that it's being more friendly to new players, right? Like, you're getting more people involved in the spec by having a lower skill cap. I don't know, again, if this is the right way to go, because really all it's doing is punishing players who are good at the spec, which is not really good, and it's kind of not impacting the people who are bad as well. Not bad, but aren't as practiced as much. Which again, you know, I'm not sure I agree with that direction. I do think the buffs might be warranted here. We'll see how Vengeance end up doing in the end with things here. But I will say that the buff to Firebrand does increase those talents a little bit. Burning Alive definitely gains some value now because of how much damage the dot does. You know, just a 600% buff is a lot. Going from 5 to 30% of attack power times 10 is a big change. Now, again, you know, I don't think it's going to change. I think frailty is still going to be really good. The fact that you can keep it up for 6 seconds is just a slight compensation for how the reduction in power is, so it's easier to keep up those higher stacks. But again, you know, your stack is going to be much less impactful because you're only going to deal 4% extra damage per stack instead of 8. So the scale a lot slower, right? So there's that. I don't really think... I don't know. We'll see how this ends up working out. I think Vengeance is still very, very good. I think Vengeance is still going to be a really fun spec to play. The gameplay doesn't really change. You're just going to feel that your abilities hit more outside of your frailty, big burst windows, and less inside of it. Which means that, you know, theoretically, you will be doing less single target. You'll be doing less burst, which are very important. It was cool that Tank was able to bring that burst like that. However, the last change, the Collective Anguish change, does actually affect Havoc. So this buffs I-beam by 10%. I know it only looks like less than 1%, but it's this times 10, right? So it ends up being a lot more than what it actually shows on here. So 10% buff to Collective Anguish is really good. This buffs the right and middle side of the Havoc tree. So the side going down to Cycle of Hatred and side going down to Any Means Necessary. Because of course, Collective Anguish gets turned into Chaos with Any Means Necessary. And with Cycle of Hatred, we end up having much more Collective Anguishes going off. So this is a good little change to Havoc as well. Which is really actually nice. It's not like insane, but I think a 10% buff to Feldev actually does end up feeling pretty good. On some dungeons, I was streaming last night on some dungeons, you know, Feldev was doing maybe 6% of my damage now, or higher, which was really, really good. It feels good to have Feldev do what it does. Of course, you know, come to the losses of Throglaive, but a lot of people didn't like the Throglaive stuff as much. But that's there, you know, hey. But I do like the change to Collective Anguish for sure. So to recap a little bit, Accelerating Blade change, fine, whatever. Demonic Wards, we're going to be a little squishy on magic damage now, and it's important to note this is only for Havoc. Vengeance is not affected. Other than that, we're going to probably be still really squishy for physical, and I hope they look at that for Havoc. For Vengeance, you're getting some nice buffs out of this. I think Firebrand is going to do a lot more damage than it did before, so in single target, we are getting that compensation because you run Firebrand in those builds. But I think overall, you're going to be a little upset about this. Doing much less burst damage is really bad. But again, if you mismanage your windows, it's going to be less than the maximum nerf. You know what I mean? So if you're kind of newer to the spec, then you're not really going to feel this, and you're only going to feel this when you get more comfortable and better with it. So we'll see how that ends up working out for tank balance. I think Vengeance was pretty good. I definitely think this is going to knock them down a few pegs, but we'll see. We'll see when things come out. Anyway, so those are the talent balance changes for Vengeance and Havoc. I don't know why they don't mention Havoc on Wowhead, but hey, that's Wowhead. Let me know what you guys think down below. Realistically, I don't think the Havoc change is that big. I think Vengeance, you know, while it's not that big of a loss in damage for like 5%, I do think the way it's they're implementing it kind of sucks. I think maybe tuning down ability. I don't know, it's hard because if you tune down abilities, then it makes the burst window even better. I think maybe touching the burst window down by 1% per point instead of 2% might be a little better. and then tuning around that. But again, you know, hey, we'll see. I'm not a game dev. That's the video for today. Leave a like if you enjoyed. Comment down below what you think of these nerfs. You know, they are nerfs despite what Wildhead says. And leave a comment. You know, let me know what you think. And then leave a sub if you enjoyed it. I'll have some nice content coming out next week. We have the release of Evoker. We have the pre-patch phase 2. So keep an eye out for that. And peace, guys.